Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Rosa, and if this is the first time that you're seeing my face, then welcome. It's so nice to have you here on the channel. So this video is the summary of Neville's 7th book called The Power of Awareness. This is a part of a series that I have on my channel where I summarize, break down, and interpret all 10 of Neville's books. So if you have not watched 1 to 6 yet, then I have a playlist on my channel that I'll link above and in the description that you can go and check out those before you come over to this one, number 7. But if you've already watched them and you're here, let's dive right in to chapter 1, Power of Awareness. Now this one has the most chapters out of all of them. There are 27. So I'm gonna do my best to simplify it as much as possible with giving you the most amount of value that I possibly can, that I've extracted from this book. It's a very valuable one, very informative. So I'm excited to dive right in. Quick little note that I want to say again is that a lot of Neville's work and his teachings are a bit repetitive, right? They say the same thing, maybe in a little slightly different way or relate it in a slightly different way. But I think this is very valuable, and he explains actually how valuable it is in this book to continue to hear the message repetitively, because the more we hear it, the more we learn it, the more it seeps into our subconscious mind, and the more our subconscious gets strengthened with the belief in the law of assumption and strengthens our faith basically in the law working. And the stronger our faith is in the law working in all these teachings, then the faster and easier and more effortless it will be for our manifestations to come into fruition. So the repetition of learning these things is very valuable, very important, because as humans, we're forgetful. We're limited by our brains. We're limited by our memory. So it's important that we continue to consciously feed our minds with the information presented within Neville's teachings. So let's jump right in. Chapter 1 is called I Am. So I am is a concept he talks about from the very beginning, and I am is the godly essence that lives within us. It is the self-definition of the absolute. So he starts the chapter with a Bible verse that says, "All things, when they are admitted, are made manifest by the light. For everything that is made manifest is light." So what Neville's sharing here is that the light is consciousness, and consciousness is one. There is no separation when it comes to the essence of creation, which is light, which is God, which our higher self is connected to. He says the I am essence cannot be divided. While you or I may consider ourselves to be rich or poor or happy or sad, these characteristics, these states, they can all change, right? But our pure essence and the center of our being will always remain the same. We will always remain tapped into this God essence that is who we truly are. He says, I may forget who I am, where I am, and what I am, but I cannot forget that I am. So it's that consciousness that connects us all. So when we tap into it, we're tapping into the oneness of this universe. He said, what determines our life, our physical expression, the way we see this world, is our concept of ourself. So if your concept of yourself is I am sick, then you are placing your I am awareness, the awareness that you are, and you're conditioning it to being sick. You're conditioning it to the conception of illness. You're taking the I am, the essence that you are, and stating of yourself, declaring of yourself that you are sick. So this is why we work on our self-concept first, change our conception of ourselves, and then your world will reflect those changes. There's no one in the external world to point your fingers at, and there's no God outside of yourself to point fingers at for making your life the way that it is, because you have the power within yourself to change your conception of yourself, to stop declaring yourself to be that which you don't want to be. Don't say I am sick if that's not who you want yourself to be, because you are taking your I am, your godly essence, and conditioning it in the condition of sickness, of illness. Chapter 2 is called Consciousness. Consciousness is the only reality. You can only change your external world by beginning in consciousness first. And only by changing your conception of yourself in consciousness can you manifest higher and higher concepts. So here he says that if we accept the idea of a first cause being light and consciousness, then all things are also made of that first cause. So everything is made of light and consciousness. Everything that exists is either a higher or lower form or variation of that same thing, of that same essence. So what appears to be your circumstances, your conditions, and even material objects is really only the product of your own consciousness. You and your world are one. On page 250, he says, therefore, you must turn from the objective appearance of things to the subjective center of things, your consciousness, if you truly desire to know the cause of the phenomena of life and how to use this knowledge to realize your desires and dreams. So the world has no objective of its own. Its only task is to produce your consciousness objectified. So if you want to see where your consciousness lives or where you live psychologically, then you will see that by looking at your reactions to life. Look at your world and how you're reacting to this world. How are you triggered by your world? Because that is reflecting to you your true self-concept and how your external world looks like to you. Once you realize where you are psychologically living, where your consciousness is residing at, you have the ability to then change your conception of yourself. Chapter 3 is called the power of assumption. So the law of assumption is that if you assume a thing to be true, then it will become true and it will express itself in your world. He says man's delusion is that there are causes other than his own state of consciousness that express themselves in your world. Basically, all transformation begins in a change of consciousness. The whole basis of your thoughts must change. So you must create an ideal. Think about who you want to be, the person you want to be in this life, and then assume you're already that person. That is what this all boils down to. And it's going to continue to come back to this fact of assume you are already that person that you desire to be. If this assumption of you being who you want to be is persisted in until it becomes your dominant feeling, then the attainment of your ideal is inevitable. Now, what makes all the difference, he says, is you're either thinking of what you desire or you're thinking from what you desire. It's a huge difference. Thinking I want this versus I am this. This is my life. This is who I am. And now I'm thinking thoughts as if I'm already this version. You must actually be that version of you. You must be the thing itself rather than just talking about it or looking at it. Now, as a human being, we all have the power within us that most of nature does not have. And that power that we have is called our imagination. It is our very consciousness and power to create our world. Chapter 4 is called desire. He says the only fate that is in your life is determined by your own assumptions. For even if your assumption is false, if persisted in, it will harden into fact. Now, we are always living by the law of assumption, whether we're conscious of it or not. But if you're ready to live consciously and decide what you want for your life, be the creator of your life, then you will accept this principle and live assuming your desire is already here. To reach a higher level of being, you must assume a higher concept of yourself. If you don't believe that you are who you want to be, then you're going to remain as you are. So really, what he's saying here is that what determines if you're going to change is your level of desire. Because if you have a bigger desire to change, you're going to put more effort and consciousness and focus into keeping your consciousness on your wish fulfilled. If you don't really want to change, you don't really care, then you're not going to put as much effort into putting this law into effect. Now, Kabbalah talks about how if you have a big desire, that's actually a really good sign because it means you have a big vessel, a big capacity to receive a lot of light. And we live in a limitless world. Life wants to give us limitless, amazing, beautiful things, but it's up to us to be able to expand ourselves, to expand our vessel, to desire the thing enough to actually take the action within our own consciousness to bring it towards us, because we have that power. But the question is, how big is our desire to use that power, to practice this muscle of manifestation and bringing our consciousness into the right place to be able to call in the things that we really desire and deserve to experience in this life. If you take on the feeling of the wish fulfilled, then your desire becomes the promise of its own fulfillment. Chapter 5 is called The Truth That Sets You Free. So he says that the truth that sets you free is that you can experience in imagination what you desire to experience in reality, and by maintaining this experience in imagination, your desire will become an actuality. Once again, we're reiterating the exact same thing here, which is imagine and feel like you are already living in that state. All circumstances and events in life are brought to pass by your assumptions. So either you recognize that you are a slave to your assumptions, or you're a master to your assumptions. You're either a slave or a master, because either way, we're always assuming things into being. To be a master of the law of assumption is the key to undreamed of freedom and happiness. And you can attain this mastery by deliberate conscious control over your imagination. You must be able to visualize and picture who you want to become and then transform yourself into that image. And he says here that repetition really helps to sink in that new image into your subconscious mind, and inevitably you will transform into the image that you rest in. You are limited only by your uncontrolled imagination and lack of attention to the feeling of your wish fulfilled. You are the master of your fate, nobody outside of you. So he's saying to stop mindlessly spending your thoughts and your time and your money, because everything in life is an investment. Chapter 6 is called Attention. So in this chapter, he really emphasizes the importance of keeping your attention in the right place. He then quotes a verse from the Bible, James 1:8, that says, "A double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways." So a lot of people think that if you want something, to let it go, to stop putting your attention on it. But Neville says, no, it's actually the opposite. We must think about it. We must keep our attention on it being here right now. We're not keeping our attention on it being on the future. Our attention must be on living in that state right now. Because when you pay attention to one state, this signifies that you decided to focus on this new state rather than the other. So you're automatically dying to the other state, leaving the other state behind when you decide to put your attention on the new state. You can only live in one state at one time. So wherever your attention goes is you making that decree and that decision to live in this new state. On page 259, he says, "The great secret of success is to focus the attention on the feeling of the wish fulfilled without permitting any distractions." And that's honestly where a lot of people get caught up and stuck when it comes to law of assumption and manifestation, is because it's hard to keep a focused attention for a lot of people on your desire when wavering thoughts are coming in, contradictory thoughts are coming in, the world around us, the 3D is telling us something different, distractions here, distractions there. It can be challenging to keep our focus and attention on solely being and feeling like we are living in this life that we choose to create. But he's saying here that that is the discipline that it takes. This is the process we need to go through if we want to realize our desires. Like, that is just how the law works, and that's just what we got to do, is have that mental discipline. And it's a practice, it's a muscle that you strengthen over time with persistence. And the more you do it, the better you get, the stronger your faith becomes, the faster your desires flow into fruition. This is why you shouldn't give up, because this is just how the law works. You're either going to manifest consciously or unconsciously. You have to decide. He says, when you set out to master the movements of your attention, you will realize how little control you exercise over your imagination. So basically he's saying this is one of the most important skills that you must develop, because we let our 3D world, we let our sensory impressions and our moods affect our internal world and our internal state. And when you become conscious and try to control your thoughts and your attention, that's when you're going to notice, oh my God, I am a slave to the external world. Oh my God, I'm a slave to the things that are taking my attention out of the life I want to create. So, it's amazing that we're learning these things so that we can continue to bring our focus and attention back to keeping our focus and attention in the right place. So he says, in order to master our attention, a practice that we can do nightly is just before drifting off to sleep, strive to hold your attention on the activities of the day in reverse order. I actually personally have not actually done this, so I feel like just kind of hard. I mean, it's meant to be hard. He says here that it's to develop the muscle of your attention. Like, strengthen your ability to keep your focus and attention on a certain thing. He says your attention must be developed, controlled, and concentrated in order to change your concept of yourself successfully and thereby change your future. And he says attention is developed by repeated exercise or habit, which totally makes sense, because through habit, an action becomes easier and then over time can be put to higher uses. Okay, great. So let's move on to chapter 7, which is called Attitude. So there were experiments that were conducted that prove that what you see depends not so much on what is actually there, as much as on the assumption that you make when you look at what is there. What we believe to be the real physical world is actually only an assumptive world. What appears to be solid reality is actually the result of expectations or assumptions. So your assumptions not only determine what you see, but also what you do, for they govern all your conscious and subconscious movements towards the fulfillment of themselves. So when it comes to attitude here, he says to assume the best and think only what is lovely and of good report, which is actually a verse from the Bible, from Philippians 4:8. So he then says that when it comes to your relationship with others, it's not who they actually are that makes you see them the way that you do, but it's your assumptions of that person that makes you see the way that they do. And he says here that if you can change your opinion of another person, if it's possible to change your mind about someone, then clearly what you believe of him now cannot be an absolute true, but it's relatively true to you right now because this is the assumption that you currently hold about this person. If it's possible to change your assumption, the way that you view them is not how they actually are, it's the way that you're just viewing them because it's your assumption of them and how they show up, and what you assume of them to be true, has to present itself and show itself in your world. This is also like confirmation bias, which is you will always look for proof of what you, to confirm the beliefs that you already hold. If you already view someone in a certain way, you're only going to see proof of them acting in that certain way because it's what you assume them to be. So they have to show up in that way. You're only going to see the perception of them that you are consciously, or most of the time subconsciously, assuming that they're going to be how they are and the story that you've created and written for them in your own mind. So he says to hold positive mental conversations with others. Because what do? We unconsciously, a lot of times with people we have problems with in our life, we have mental arguments with people. We mentally criticize people for how they are, and we don't realize that us doing this mentally, thinking about how another person is doing something wrong or is bad or is out to get us or doesn't understand you or whatever the story is that you are telling yourself unconsciously a lot of the times, we don't realize that that is what's creating them to be this way in our world. They must show up how we assume that they will. He's saying that we basically, when we do this, we're basically whispering to them in secret. Because our subconscious minds are all connected. We are all connected through the God that lives within us, the subconscious, the fourth dimensional reality. So when you think something of another, that is your subconscious assumption, and you're basically whispering to them in secret, this is how they have to show up to you in your reality. So what you must do is imagine someone telling you what you want them to say, and then feel that this change is real, that they've really said this, that they really changed, and then they will change. And they will think that it's their own idea to change, but really it's your own assumption changing, which changes the outer reality, because our assumptions are what create reality. It is not facts, but imagination that shapes our life, which goes completely against what we consciously, logically know to be true, right? We think that this world is creating itself, or that things are just happening, but it's not that things are happening and that's leading us to think of someone a certain way. It's that we first thought of them a certain way, and then that shapes our outer reality. A lot of times this is a subconscious process. So becoming conscious of this process can be challenging because we're realizing how much we don't have control over a lot of our assumptions, but we can take that control through the practice of everything that he's talking about here. So let's move on to chapter 8, which is renunciation. So renunciation is rejecting something, basically. So there's a difference between resisting evil and renouncing, rejecting evil. He says when you resist it, you are giving your attention to it and you're continuing to make it real. But when you renounce it, you are taking your attention away from it and giving your attention to what you want. So there's a difference between trying to resist something and trying so hard to get rid of something versus just taking your attention away from it and giving your attention rather to the thing that you desire to happen rather than what you don't want to be the reality. So you're either feeding it or you're taking your attention away. So he says that we must put our conscious attention, concentrate our attention on the things that you would like or how you would like things to be rather than as they currently are. Because to think of them as they currently are is to keep yourself stuck in that reality where things don't change. You must feel already like the change has been made in order to bring that change towards you. We must also maintain a joyous attitude regardless of the external unfavorable circumstances that are happening in our life. We must make this a permanent part of our consciousness. Chapter 9 is called Preparing Your Place. So preparing your place is like a saying that stems from the Bible. And he says, you go and prepare your place for yourself by imagining yourself into the feeling of your wish fulfilled. He begins the chapter by saying, all is yours. Don't go seeking for that which you are. Appropriate it, claim it, assume it. Everything depends upon your conception of yourself. So he says to hold in your imagination what you want to happen in your life, what is good in your life that you just want to see, because that is what makes life worthwhile, right? We want things to be good in our life, so why assume things that are going to be bad? When we can take that power, that same power that we're doing anyway, that is unconsciously manifesting, but take that and consciously decide to focus on the good. So he says you do this by imagining that you're already what you want to be. You have what you want to have. And when you feel this way, your natural state becomes a state of happiness. If you are already what you desire to be, then you'll never have to search for it because you're content, you're happy, you're living in a state of bliss, you're living in the miraculous world, as I call it in my book. Assumptions build a bridge of incidents that leads to the fulfillment of your desire. He says man believes the future to be a natural development of the past, but the law of assumption shows that this is not the case, that our assumptions are what create our future. But when does the past create the future? When you assume that something is going to repeat itself, then it will. But you can change your assumptions. So chapter 10 is called Creation. And he says that creation is finished. Everything is existing right now. That time is not real. And although we experience life in a linear way where things have a time sequence for everything, in actual reality, in the fourth dimension, everything is coexisting in an infinite and eternal now. So when you realize this, you understand this concept, which is a very deep concept, and it's not something you really understand logically. It's more something that you come to intuitively know and understand as you experience this reality, this fourth dimensional reality. Or if you're open-minded and can expand your mind to the possibility of this being the reality, when you truly understand this, you realize that nothing is ever to be created. It is only being manifested by a reality, a dimensionally larger world that is already existing out there where everything is happening all at once. So you're not creating things. You're just bringing them down from a reality where they're already existing. You're awakening what is already existing in a dimensionally larger world. A little side note here that this explains déjà vu, the concept of déjà vu, and why do we feel like something's already happening? Because everything has already happened. Everything that is happening right now, this very moment right now, has happened. The whole of creation exists in you, and it's your destiny to become increasingly aware of its infinite wonders and experience even greater portions of life. So if we truly understand creation is finished, all events take place now, all timelines exist, then the question becomes, what determines which timeline we tap into and which events are we going to encounter in our 3D world, this world that we're living in this human experience? And he says the answer is in your conception of yourself. Your self-concept. Now, a good test to prove this is to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled and observe the route that your attention follows. As long as you remain faithful to your assumption, attention will be confronted with images clearly related to that assumption. So, for example, if you assume that you have a wonderful business, this is what you're trying to manifest, you want to have an amazing business, then you're going to notice that in your imagination, your attention is focused on incidents that imply that assumption. So if you have a successful business, what events would naturally occur? Friends would congratulate you, you would see your bigger bank account, and the more you begin to feel this reality, you begin to feel it's natural, what happens is your vision of this reality expands. You begin to then envision more and desire more in that reality of the assumption that you're beginning to live in. So now you see a larger office, you see a bigger bank account, and just more visuals come to you as you begin to strengthen the assumption, or as Kabbalah would say, build your vessel, and as your desire expands, as you begin to tap more and more and more into this reality that already exists. You're just becoming more aware of it. You're creating more space for it. Your desire is expanding so that you can actualize more of it into your reality. He says that persistence in the assumption will actualize the fact in your 3D of that assumption. If your concept of yourself is you see yourself as a failure, then what are you naturally going to do, and what do most people naturally do before they become aware of this law, is you will naturally imagine a whole series of incidents to conform to that self-concept, right? If I see myself as a failure, I'm going to constantly see mentally in my visuals me failing at things, people saying negative things to me, right? But this is usually done on autopilot. It's an unconscious process that happens based on the assumption that we hold upon ourselves. So this is why when we see things expressing themselves in our world that are not favorable, it's really just a mirror and a reflection and feedback to us to show us what our conception of ourself is and what our assumptions are on the world, on ourselves, and of life. So now we're conscious of it, now we can change it. Chapter 11 is called Interference. He says, you are free to choose the concept that you will accept of yourself. You possess the power to alter your future. So you must rise from your present conception of yourself to a higher conception of yourself, because imagination is what made your world. Now, chapter 12 is called Subjective Control. Where is your attention? Your imagination is able to do all that you ask in proportion to the degree of your attention. So attention is either attracted from within yourself or from without, from the external world. So when your attention is coming from without, that is when you're consciously occupied with the external impressions of the immediate present. So even you listening to me right now, that is you attracting your attention from without. This world constantly is giving us impressions. And when our attention is focused on the external world, that's when our attention is focused without. And that's normal. We live in a physical world. We're going to have our attention constantly being pulled from without and focused on things that are happening. But your attention is focused within when you are deliberately choosing consciously what you will be preoccupied with mentally. So starting from your consciousness rather than letting your external world dictate your internal state, when your attention is attracted from within, you are choosing what you're feeding to yourself. On page 271, he says, there's an enormous difference between attention directed objectively and attention directed subjectively, and the capacity to change your future depends on the latter. So we must be able to direct our attention from within. We must be able to develop that skill of controlling the movements of our attention in the subjective world, and that can modify or alter our life however we desire. But we must give more power and feed the internal reality more than we're feeding the external reality, which again is a practice because we're not used to that. We're used to just simply following the external world. This is a whole new world and a whole new way of thinking to be able to move in consciousness and use our consciousness to create our reality. He says your control cannot be achieved if you allow your attention to be constantly attracted from the outside world. So he says every day, set yourself a task to deliberately withdraw your attention from the objective world and focus it solely on the subjective, which meditation is great for, right? Because you're tuning out the external and you're going into your internal world of consciousness, which is why Neville is huge on meditation, living in your internal world, creating your inner world to be greater than your external world. He says the day you achieve control of movements of your attention in the subjective world, that is when you master your fate. Our outer physical events are results of previous and usually forgotten states of consciousness, because what kind of world do we live in? We live in a world where there is time and there is space. So there is a time delay between our assumption and its actualization. So what we are seeing actualized in our world right now is only a result of our past beliefs, our past assumptions. We are seeing manifested to us our past consciousness, which is why we cannot give so much power to the external world, because it's just a manifestation of our past beliefs. This is why persisting in that new assumption is so important, because it's over time when you're going to experience it in your outer world. You concentrating your attention is you exercising your creative power. He says that we must make our imagined state so real that when you return to the objective world, you return back to 3D reality, and then you find that it's not the same as your imagined state, that it's an actual shock, right? That's the goal, is to make it feel so real in imagination that when you don't see it in your 3D, you're like, what do you mean? This is my reality, and it feels almost just weird to not see it in your reality. He says that this shock reverses your time sense, meaning that instead of your experience resulting from your past, your experience is now a result of being in imagination where you have not physically been yet. And we have this power to live consciously in a space that is not yet physically 3D presented itself yet, but it exists in a dimensionally larger world. So when you tap into that dimensionally larger world and you're feeling and imagining like you have experienced the thing you want to experience, then you actually have experienced it, but it has not yet manifested or been brought down into this 3-dimensional world. He says, when you truly feel, it is so real when you're in this subjective state, this moves you across a bridge of incidents to the physical realization of your imagined state. Chapter 14 is called The Effortless Way. So the effortless way is the principle of what he calls least action. And he says that the principle of least action governs everything in physics, from the path of a planet to the path of a pulse of light. It is the minimum of energy multiplied by the minimum of time. Therefore, in moving from your present state to the state desired, you must use the minimum amount of energy and take the shortest possible time. Sounds great, doesn't it? But so he says the journey from one state to another is not in the physical actions you take, but it happens in consciousness. He says the psychological equivalent of least action, is assumption. Assumption is the path of least effort, because assumption is attention minus effort. By assuming, you're putting in the least action, because you're not physically doing anything, you're just working in your consciousness, working mentally in assuming the thing is already here. So he says, be still, least action, and know that you are that which you desire to be. That's all you have to do, is what Neville is stating here. Chapter 15 is called The Crown of Mysteries. He says that the assumption is the crown of mysteries because it is the highest use of consciousness. Once we assume, the realization of your desire is subconscious and effortless. Assume you already have what you want. Done. When you assume, the wish is fulfilled. You are mentally lifted up to a higher level. Through persistence, your assumption becomes fact, and you are automatically lifted to a higher level reality where your desire is already here. So, if infinite potential realities exist, and right now you're currently here, but you want to be here, assume that you are here, and your life is naturally going to align you to be up here. You're naturally going to raise yourself to the level of your desire already existing, because there is already a timeline that exists where your desire is already here. So you must just lift yourself in consciousness to that state. Your assumption guides all your conscious and subconscious movements towards its suggested end, so it dictates the events that happen to get you there. That is not your job to dictate how you get up there. You just simply assume that you're there, and naturally you elevate to that state. You bring that state towards you, whatever. You meet in the middle, right? Because it's already existing. You're not creating it. You're just aligning to it. Chapter 16 is called Personal Impotence. Self-surrender is essential, which means that you must know that you are personally impotent. In the beginning of the chapter, he quotes a Bible verse from John 5:30 that says, I can of my own self do nothing. So he's basically saying that surrendering yourself is essential. You must know that you are personally impotent, meaning that you on a personal level do not have the ability to take the effective action. You're basically helpless when it comes to physically laboring to get your manifestation. We must realize it's not in our control, in our physical ability to take the action to manifest. I, of my own self, of my limited human capacity, don't do anything. I leave that up to my higher self. I leave that up to the God that lives within me. Since creation is finished, we understand that infinite potential realities exist. We're not forcing anything into being through our conscious efforts. You don't create it, you just uncover it. You cannot make a law, you can only use a law. So you must either surrender yourself to the law or yield to the law. And, think about it like the law of magnetism, he says. You cannot make the law of magnetism. You work with the law of magnetism so you can build a magnet. Similarly, the law of assumption is a law. You cannot create the law. You cannot change the law of assumption, but you work with the law of assumption to realize your desires. All of your experiences are results of conscious or unconscious assumptions. So you're either going to work with the law, create a life that you love, or the law is just going to work for you without your awareness, and then you're going to be a victim to your life. The choice is yours. Chapter 17 is called All Things Are Possible. Since we all have God living within us, and all things are possible to God, then all things living within your infinite being is possible for you to manifest. The only requirement on your part is to disregard appearances and conditions and rest in the assumption that you are already that which you want to be. Each assumption has its corresponding world. Claim your wish fulfilled and it will respond. In every moment, you are assuming a feeling. You can't just avoid assumptions. You're always assuming something. So just as you can't avoid eating or drinking, you have to know that you are constantly creating assumptions. So you can't control the fact that you're assuming, or you cannot change the law of assumption. You cannot stop the law from working. The only thing that you can control is the nature of your assumption. And the control of these assumptions is the key to you living a happier and expansive life. Chapter 18 is called Be Ye Doers. Being a doer means applying the law, right? Not just learning it. Because our desire is not coming into reality by just us wishful thinking or thinking about this law, learning about this law. Because even the most profound understanding of this law, you completely understand every single word I just said. It doesn't matter. That is not what's going to manifest in your life. It comes through actually implementing, actually seeing yourself, feeling yourself, and assuming yourself to be the person that you desire to be. And then keeping that feeling alive until your desire is here. It is the action in this that works, not just the understanding. The understanding gives us the conscious awareness of what the workings are and what's happening and the fact that our assumptions are creating, but that does not determine, that doesn't, just the knowledge on it alone does not mean that our life is automatically going to change. It means we now need to do the work to change our assumptions to get our life to change. We need to ignore the current reality, which is, it can be challenging, right? I don't want to say it is, it's a limitation, but it very much can be, especially when you're first learning about this law, first diving into it. You know, over time it gets easier and easier and easier, and it's a lifelong journey. That is why we're here on this earth, is to practice this, to learn this, and to develop the skill more and more and more. The faster you're going to get at it, the more beautiful life becomes. So it's important to frequently remind ourselves of this law, like I said in the beginning of this video, because it's necessary, because the more that it permeates into our subconscious mind, even at the risk of repetition, it doesn't matter, because we need to constantly remind ourselves, because it's like a skill, right? We need to constantly develop this skill or this talent, and the less that you develop it, the less that you exercise it, the more that it withers away. As soon as you create an ideal in your mind, identify yourself with that ideal until you become one with that ideal, and therefore transforming yourself into it. Chapter 19 is called Essentials. He says, the essential points in a successful use of the law of assumption are: first, having the desire. You must have an intense, longing, and yearning, burning desire to change. Because desire mixed with good intentions begins all successful ventures. Your present level of awareness wants to transcend itself. That's what desire is. It's constant longing to transcend where your current state is. We have desires because we're currently living in a state, and the desire wants us to transcend beyond that state, to get closer and closer to the light, to God, to the true reality. That was some deep stuff right there, channeled. But that is our goal. That is our ultimate desire, is to get closer to the truth of who we are, which is the God of our reality. So the more we can manifest what we desire, we're learning more and more and more this truth, which is that we are God. That's why we desire things, to express them. Because when we express them, we are God. Me realizing things right now. Oh my God. You guys just witnessed a live in action channel of me realizing something as I speak. So there you go. Now the second thing, after desire is there, we cultivate the physical immobility, the state akin to sleep, the deep meditational state, the relaxed state, where our body is relaxed, but our mind is awake. We have conscious control of the direction of our intention. He says we must learn to be able to induce the state at will. So the reason that the physical immobility is so powerful is because it gives more mental force and increases your power of concentration. Now the third way to use the law successfully is to experience in imagination what you would experience in reality had you achieved your goal, but not as an onlooker, but a partaker thinking from the end. Now the first point, desire, you are thinking of what you want. You're thinking of the end with the desire to realize it, to get to that state. You're not yet, at that level where you're thinking from it. You're just, when you have the desire, you're planting the seed. But then once you get to the third point, you must switch it from thinking of what you want to thinking from what you want. I am feeling this way. I am living in this new state. And the key here is to make it feel pleasurable. How would you feel if you were in that state? We only desire things because we want to feel good. So start feeling good right now. Feel that as if your desire is already here right now, and you will call it towards you. Chapter 20 is called Righteousness. He defines righteousness as the consciousness of already being what you want to be. This does not refer to adherence to moral codes, civil law, or religious precepts. he said. So don't attach too much meaning to the word righteousness, because it just means obtaining the consciousness of already being what you want. You can be saved not by the external world, but by believing yourself to be in the new state. Focus on the self-concept of the person who has XYZ thing you desire. How would they feel? Righteousness is the awareness that you already possess it all. Chapter 21 is called Free Will. So he here asks and then answers the question of, what should I do between creating the assumption of the wish fulfilled and its realization? And to that he answers, nothing. It is a delusion to think that anything other than assuming can do anything to realize your desires. You think you can do something about it. You want to do something about it because our logical mind wants to take control, but you can't. He says the illusion of free will to do is ignorant of the law of assumption upon which all action is based. Once you have the assumption, everything automatically happens without your need for control. It's your assumptions that direct your thoughts and your actions to fulfillment. So it's not that you don't ever take actions, it's that you're not forcing the actions. The actions come naturally once you already assume that you are who you desire to be. To understand the law of assumption, you must get rid of all illusions about free will to act. Free will means the freedom to select any idea that you desire and assume it's a reality. The rest isn't in your control. So he's saying that free will is not in your free will to take the actions. Your free will is in deciding what you want and assuming that state. That is your free will to choose. The rest is not in my control. We just have control over who we claim ourselves to be. So make your conception of yourself, make your assumptions positive, make them happy concepts. And he says there's no better time to start than right now, in this present moment. Claim for yourself the good in yourself and in others. See only the good in people and you will be their prophet and their healer. You will win in assumption what you can never win with force. You have infinite free will to choose your assumptions. There is no other power to determine the conditions and events in your world. You can create nothing but the assumptions that determine what portion of creation you are going to experience and call into your reality. Chapter 22 is called Persistence, and he's just reiterating here, we must persist in assuming the consciousness of the wish fulfilled, and it must be given to you. It's not enough to feel into the state of an answered prayer, you must persist in that state. Only the persistence in that assumption, in that feeling of the wish fulfilled, will cause those changes in your actual subconscious mind, which will result in changes in your life. When people in the external world appear to not act the way that you desire them to, know that it's not their fault, but a lack of persistence in your mental assumption of your life already being the way that you want them to be, of this person already acting in the way that you wish that they would. It can't be just a single isolated act of, oh, I just assume this, but a maintained attitude of your wish fulfilled. Chapter 23 is Case Histories, and here he shares examples of successful applications of the law, which I'm going to skip out on sharing for the sake of the length of this video, because this is a really long one. It's 27 chapters. But yeah, there's 8 stories that he shares. If you guys want to dive more into that, you guys can check out his book, or maybe someone else has it online, but I'm not going to go over them here. They're just basically examples of how this law works in application. Chapter 24 is called Failure. Now, he says it's very important that he talks about failure when using the law of assumption, because it's inevitable that it's possible, he says, that you have or will have a number of failures, many in important matters. So, of course, the automatic question is, did you persist enough? But if the answer to that is yes, then the reason for failure, he says, is this. The time that it takes your assumption to become fact, your desire to be fulfilled, is directly proportionate to the naturalness of your feeling of already being what you want to be, of already having your desires. AKA, how natural does it feel to have your desire? If it feels unnatural, then you have a lot of resistance, then that is why he's saying that your desire is not in fruition, because you have resistance towards it, because it doesn't feel like it's a natural part of your life. And that is the key. We need to get it to feel like it's just natural. He says not feeling it natural is the secret to failure. If you don't feel natural about what you want to be, you won't be it. Now, how do we feel natural? Imagination. Persistently filling your consciousness with imagination. You must feel that with imagination, all things are possible. Once you know consciousness is the only reality and you have burnt this truth into your whole being, which is why this is the number one self-concept to adopt, which is that consciousness is the only reality. You are the God of your reality. You can create reality however you desire to. When this is ingrained within you, you know this so deeply, you have burnt this truth into your whole being, then you know that success or failure is entirely in your own hands. So just because you feel like you have a struggle doing it does not mean that the law is not true. He says, don't let failure mean that the law of assumption doesn't work. He says, look within yourself, because it must mean that there's some error or weakness in your consciousness, but don't get discouraged about this because it can be overcome. This world exists for you. Chapter 25 is called Faith. He begins the chapter by saying, a miracle is a name given by those who have no faith to the works of faith. And then in Hebrews 11:1, it says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. If you didn't believe that what you desire is a possible reality, if you don't believe it's possible to achieve XYZ, whatever it is you want to achieve, then it would be impossible to assume the consciousness of having it. If you don't believe it's possible, how can you believe you have it, right? You must first believe it's possible. You must know creation is finished and everything exists and is possible. Faith is the awareness of the reality of that which you assume. The lack of faith means you disbelieve in the existence of what you desire. The lack of faith means you'll fail to manifest using the law of assumption. Faith is done in consciousness. Faith does not question. Faith knows. In other words, faith, he's basically using faith synonymous with having certainty, having a knowing of an outcome. Knowing something is going to happen is the secret. We must have that faith. If you don't believe it's possible, you're not going to assume it, you're not going to realize it. So that's why faith is such an important factor and step in all of this. Chapter 26 is called Destiny. So what is destiny? Destiny is what you must inevitably experience. It means it's written out, it's destined for you. But now we are learning there are infinite destinies. Every single timeline, every single destiny is already written out. And once you attain one destiny, a new destiny begins. You want to create more and more and more for yourself. Our consciousness is the only reality and therefore the only creator of which destiny we tap into. You are creating your destiny in every moment, whether you know it or not. You are switching to a new destiny. It is your destiny to rise to higher and higher states of consciousness and bring into manifestation your desires. Chapter 27, this is the last chapter, and it's called Reverence. He says the most wonderful fact to know is the concept that you are God consciousness. He says this is a truth that you can never know intellectually. You are not your body. You are the consciousness behind the body. Whether you want to call this consciousness your soul, your higher self, your greater self, the infinite being, your deeper self, it doesn't matter. It is within you. You cannot debate this topic. You can only feel it and be aware of it, understand your consciousness of being. He says that once you truly become aware of it, there is one great emotion that will permeate your being, and that is reverence. Reverence is having a love and a deep respect and admiration for yourself. He says the creator is the very self of yourself and would never have created you if he had not loved you. And this knowing, when you truly know this, it fills your heart with devotion, adoration, and love. When the feeling of reverence or love is most intense, you are the closest to God and to your higher self and your true self. And this is where life is its richest. He then ends off the book with the quote, "Our deepest feelings are precisely those we are least able to express, and in the act of adoration, silence is our highest praise." If you guys made it to the end of this video, I would love for you to leave me we already did butterflies, yellow heart emoji. Please leave me a yellow heart emoji in the comment section down below if you made it to the end of this video. Let me know if you got value out of it. What was the most valuable takeaway that you got from Neville's 7th book? I would love to hear it. Please share it with me. I love reading your comments. It really means a lot to me that you are here and hopefully gaining value from everything that I am sharing in these videos. But that is all for me in this video, guys. I hope you got value out of it. If you did, please leave it a like and a comment down below, letting me know what's the most valuable thing that you got out of Neville's 7th book. Hit that subscribe button for new videos every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And without further ado, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye. Love you.